Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people should be aware that this series may contain images, voices, or names of deceased persons.
This episode, Our Island Home, is part of the series that looks at the land. It will take you all the way from Canberra to the northernmost tip of tropical Australia. We'll look at the way global warming is changing the Australian landscape and the threat posed to the Great Barrier Reef in Queensland. And we'll retrace the voyage of the Endeavour all along the eastern seaboard. Lieutenant James Cook here was a man with a mission. Well, several missions actually. In the summer of 1768, Cook was appointed commander of His Majesty's bark Endeavour, and he was ordered to sail that tiny vessel all the way from Plymouth to Tahiti.
A team of scientists was on board, amongst them the leading astronomers of the day. They'd observe the transit of Venus, calculate the distance of the Sun from the Earth, and change the nature of naval navigation.
From Tahiti, Cook was sent south, across an ocean, as the Admiralty's secret instructions put it, but imperfectly explored, to parts fabled and distant. That mission would help to solve a mystery. Was there a great southern land, balancing out the land masses of the globe? And did it harbour new plants, strange animals, and mineral riches beyond the imagination?
In a feat of seamanship, Cook circumnavigated the North and South Islands of Aotearoa, or New Zealand, the first European to do so. Then, over a year and over 8,000 miles from England, he turned the ship west and set sail for the eastern coast of Australia.
Cook came ashore at Botany Bay, on the traditional lands of the Guigal people. And there Joseph Banks and the artists and naturalists accompanying him gathered plants and specimens that would simply astound the scientific community back home in Britain. And then the Endeavour sailed north, taking soundings of the sea, marking every bay and every island and every headland.
And all those discoveries on land, sea and space very almost came to nothing. An hour before midnight on the 9th of June 1770, the ship struck the Great Barrier Reef. Coral cut deep into her timber planks and water surged through the vessel.
The Endeavour was impaled on the reef. The crew threw ballast, coal, even precious provisions overboard, desperate to set her free. Amongst the cargo jettisoned were 6 of these mighty cannon, symbols of Britain's naval power discarded in the deep.
It was almost 24 hours before the ship was winched free from the reef. Men strained at the pumps to save her from sinking. On the high tide, the Endeavour sailed away, but her cannon, of course, remained. This cannon, encrusted with coral, was recovered from the sea in 1969, almost 200 years since the Endeavour's fateful voyage. It embodies Europeans' first great encounter with the Great Barrier Reef, and it's the object that frames this episode.
I'm here on the shores of Cape Tribulation, far North Australia, tropical Queensland. And the Great Barrier Reef, and the place where the Endeavour was hulled, is way, way out there. But that simple term reef is misleading. This isn't a single continuous expanse of coral, but a series of over 3,000 separate reefs, dotted along 2,300 kilometres of coastline. The reef begins in the far south of Queensland, and it stretches to the northernmost tip of Cape York and beyond. This is the only living structure you can see from outer space, 300,000 kilometres squared, as big as Holland, Switzerland and the United Kingdom combined. And within the reef complex, there's an array of different environments. 600 continental islands, sandbars, open water, mangrove estuary, sheltered lagoon.
So little wonder Cook called this network of navigational hazards a labyrinth. Threading his way through these uncharted waters seemed an almost impossible task.
Thanks, Richard. Cook knew little of what lay beneath these waters. Indeed, in the 18th century, scientists still weren't sure if coral was an animal, a mineral, or a plant. So, let's find out. I'm diving across a stretch of Opal Reef, not far from where the Endeavour came to grief. Very little of this amazing marine world can be seen from the surface. Around me are living corals of different shapes, colours and sizes. It's like a garden of immense diversity, one of the natural wonders of the world. And teeming around this reef is a multitude of marine life. Turtles and clams, starfish and dolphins, creatures as large as a whale and as small as microscopic organisms, over 2,000 separate species of fish. Coral reefs support all of them and so much more besides. As the Endeavour sailed through these waters, she glided over great forests of seaweed, meadows of tentacled sea anemone, an ocean floor littered with countless different kinds of sponges and shells. And then in the night, she grounded on a reef like this one, a great mound of limestone rising up from the ocean floor. So what exactly is coral? It's not simply a plant, as many on the Endeavour believed. This is a piece of coral that had settled on the sea floor. At the base is the limestone skeleton of a coral polyp, and it died thousands of years before the Endeavour sailed onto the scene and above. In brilliant colour is a piece of living coral. It's beautiful and I will return it to the seafloor. A polyp is a small sac-like animal, barely a few centimetres in length, but it secretes calcium carbonate, gradually building the reef around it. Typically, a reef complex isn't one organism, but a network of communities, all interrelated and dependent on each other. Together, they build what today's scientists call a coral framework, a limestone base like this at its bottom and living, growing, breathing coral at the top.
The reef the Endeavour struck, and where Susan is diving today, is 12 kilometres out to sea. But fringing reefs, partially submerged by the incoming tide, run right up to the shore.
And that reminds us once again that the Great Barrier Reef isn't one chain of reefs, it's actually several. The Endeavour struck the outer reef, way out there. And once the crew had set her free, casting that cannon overboard to lighten the ship, the Endeavour had to weave her way back across this shallow lagoon, avoiding one coral outcrop after another.
The outer reef was created after melting of polar ice caps submerged over a quarter of the Australian landmass. Scientists date that sharp rise in our sea level to some 20,000 years ago. But Aboriginal people remember that event as if it happened yesterday. The way this coastline has changed is woven into the myths of the Dreamtime, as ancestral creatures marshalled the waters and shaped and reshaped this land. Where the reef now stands used to mark the precipitous edges of the Australian landscape. And the great lagoon the Endeavour sailed across was kangaroo country then, rich and fertile hunting land.
Rising waters claimed much of this coastline, and they almost claimed the crew of the Endeavour. Amazingly, the very coral that almost sunk the ship also saved it. A lump of coral limestone as large as a man's fist was wedged in between the broken timbers of the hull, plugging just enough of the incoming water to stop the Endeavour from sinking. Set adrift on a rising tide with those heavy cannons thrown into the deep, the vessel limped on to the mouth of the Endeavour River, further north, and eventually beached on dry land.
For the crew of the Endeavour, the Great Barrier Reef embodied all the terrors of the deep. And really, where they came ashore, well, it didn't seem that much better. We might see this place today as a tropical paradise. It didn't seem like that to the crew of the Endeavour, a crew who was lost, a crew who was afraid, a crew who feared most of all that they'd never find their way home to England. So Cook called this point Cape Tribulation. And this place was described as a barbaric coast, a coast unimproved by human hands. And yet the truth is that Aboriginal people have worked this land, have cherished this land, have made this land a place of plenty since time immemorial.
Cook and his crew were imperilled by the reef. But today, the reef itself faces its own struggle for survival.
Why is Australia's largest World Heritage Area under threat? Well, the biggest threat today comes from global warming. The water underneath me is 28 degrees, so we're going to go back in to explore some more. Beneath me is a coral desert, the snow-white skeletons of a dozen different species. Once, these corals harboured a host of algae and microorganisms, zooxanthellae scientists call it, and it lived in the polyp's inner tissue. In a healthy reef system, algae carries out the work of photosynthesis. It converts sunlight into nutrients like sugar, feeding the polyp and creating all that dazzling colour we associate with a healthy coral outcrop. Zooxanthellae also recycles polyp waste and helps convert calcium carbonate into the physical framework of the reef. It's a delicate balance, an instance of what scientists call a symbiotic relationship between one species and another. But global warming throws that balance out. As water temperatures rise, zooxanthellae comes under stress and it begins to move away from its coral host. And if that stress persists, the coral tissue dies and only these bleached skeletons remain. We've seen rising waters, lowered salinity, and drowning corals before. But those reefs had thousands of years to relocate and recover. As with everything about climate change, the time frame now is infinitely shorter. Over the last 27 years, it's estimated that Queensland has lost around half of its living coral. And on top of that, global warming intensifies the cyclones that regularly batter this coastline. The Great Barrier Reef, the entire shore of northern Australia, is an environment under siege.
And in a way, the reef is a kind of case study of the environmental calamity that's affecting our whole planet. Global warming, rising sea levels don't just signal the loss of this unique World Heritage Area. Coral is actually critical to the very life of our oceans. It's time we began to tread much more carefully, because lose the coral and you will lose the natural habitats of thousands and thousands of species. Surely, if ecology has taught us anything, it's that the life of the sea and the life of this forest, human activity and the natural environment are all interrelated.
So what's Australia doing about that? In 2012, our country ratified the Kyoto Treaty, committing ourselves to binding reductions in greenhouse gas emission. But arguably, as a major supplier of coal, Australia fuels greenhouse emissions the world over. And that coal is being mined near here, on the very edges of this World Heritage Area. To ship that coal overseas, Queensland is building a major port in the heart of the marine park. We've yet to see what long-term impact massive dredging and constant shipping movements could have on this fragile environment. But we know a single accident at sea, akin to the Endeavour's misadventure 200 years ago, would signal disaster. And whatever way you look at it, coal production here is fueling the cycle of warming many believe is threatening the survival of the planet. Most carbon dioxide emissions are absorbed by the ocean. That warms and acidifies ocean waters, it depletes oxygen from the sea, and may well change life forever on the reef.
Coal may be one of Australia's major exports, but tourism surely is one of Australia's greatest assets. It's an industry here in this forest and out there on that reef that's worth over $5 billion annually. But really, let's think about this. Is economics the only equation we should be considering here? What's the true cost of losing this unique environment? That's a question our generation is charged now to consider.
So the fate of this tropical paradise really lies now in the balance, like the fate of the Endeavour over 200 years earlier. The Endeavour escaped destruction through the resolute leadership of her captain and the dogged determination of her crew. Australia and the world now need that same sense of leadership, that same determination to avert disaster today.
If you'd like to learn more about the issues raised in this episode, why not catch Susan Carland in conversation? This time, Susan's talking to the environmental historian Ruth Morgan in the Daintree forests of tropical Queensland.